PWTV Episode 7, an exercise in carrying stuff. Actually, a lot of this episode is about the AC3 ZoneController. You might notice that these trees look a little different. Well, we just moved, and unfortunately I don't have access to the same forest as before, but hopefully this one will work out okay. Today, there are a couple different topics that I'll talk about. We'll start off by working with the AC3 and flash exposure compensation. Next, we'll go into learn mode with the Mini TT1 and Flex TT5, and then I'll wrap everything up by heading back to our new studio and explaining a couple different ways that you can use the AC3 with a Sekonic meter. I've heard some reports of overexposures when using the AC3 to control multiple zones of light in TTL mode. Here's what's happening. You've got your A flash and your B flash, and both A and B are set to 0 flash exposure compensation on the AC3. Both your lights are pointed at the same subject, say me for example, and you take a shot. You get an overexposure. Well, the AC3 uses flash exposure compensation completely independently for each zone. So each zone of light is going to be metered so that it outputs the right amount of light to illuminate your subject normally, to get a normal exposure. If you have both of those flashes pointed at the same subject, and you have 0 dialed in for flash exposure compensation, you're going to get an overexposure of about a stop. So if you've got multiple zones of light in TTL pointed at the same subject, just dial down flash exposure compensation on your zones on your AC3 and you should be good to go. This is a little bit different from how Canon's ratio controls on something like an SDE2 operate. The SDE2, being just a ratio controller, actually balances light between zones. So if you have it set to 1-1, which should be just about balanced, it's actually going to reduce the power of your flashes and purposely underexpose each zone to give you a normal exposure. What's that Flex TT5? Some people think you have to use learn mode or you won't talk to your friends here. No, I understand that you like these guys. I'll explain it to them, no problem. On the Mini and Flex, C1 and C2 are set to channels 1 and 2 right out of the box. As long as you have your transmitting radio set to the same channel as your receiving radio, you should be good to go. Now, you might want to use learn mode if you're out in the field, for example, maybe at a wedding and another photographer lets you borrow one of his radios. That radio may be set to channel 17 or 19 or 23, and your Mini and Flex are only programmed for 1 and 2 right now. So since you don't have access to the PocketWizard utility, you can use learn mode to teach a Mini or Flex the channel of any other PocketWizard, and then they'll work together. Mark Wallace actually explains how learn mode works really well in this video. Check it out right here. Let's go back to my studio. We'll talk about how to use one of these guys with a Sekonic meter. Come on. Got an AC3 and a Sekonic meter. Want to use them together? First, a little background on how the PocketWizard module inside this meter works. It communicates a lot like one of our +2 radios in that it only transmits on what we call standard channels. When you use an AC3, the connected PocketWizard uses control TL channels to communicate your changes to the remote flashes. So since the remote Flex TT5s are receiving on control TL channels, they can't work with the PocketWizard in the Sekonic meter at the same time. To you as a photographer, this means that you can't trip your flashes with your meter at power levels that you've previously set with your AC3, but there are a couple other ways you can do it. You could set your meter to cumulative mode and then fire your camera to trip the flashes. That way, any power levels you set via the ZoneController will be communicated to your flashes, and the meter will automatically detect the light when they're fired. So cumulative mode and trigger the meter, and then fire the camera. F22. If you can't have your camera and the meter in your hand at the same time, sort of like I did, you can set your camera to a 10-second timer. For the sake of this video, I'll just use 2 seconds, but let's dial in a power level on our AC3, let's say full power to both our remotes, and then start the camera and put the meter in cumulative mode. F22. Thanks for watching PWTV. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email via the inquiry page at PocketWizard.com.